The Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast is brought to you by the following sponsors: EliteForm.com, IgnitionAPG.com, PlayUSA at PLAEUSA.com, and Sorinex Exercise Equipment at Sorinex.com. And now, the Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast. Welcome to Iron Game Chalk Talk with your host, Ron McKeefery.
Every time our athletes walk into this weight room, they're going to be pushed to the max.
Let's go! Everything you got!
On this podcast, hear Coach McKeefery's straight talk about training, featuring the top strength and conditioning professionals from around the world. And now, here's your host, Ron McKeefery.
Hey guys, welcome back to Iron Game Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Ron McKeefery, and this is episode number 138. Just got back from the 2016 NSCA Coaches Conference, and what a fantastic time. Really enjoyed getting a chance to catch up with everyone. Appreciate all the people that came up and told me how much they value Iron Game Chalk Talk, the book, the support that I got for the award, the College Strength and Conditioning Coach Award of the year, and just blown away and humbled by the outpour of support. And so I couldn't thank you guys enough for that. Can't thank NSCA enough for putting on a great conference and a platform for us all to continue to learn. Scott Caulfield put together a fantastic speaker list. Just first-class event all the way throughout. And so I know that if you were there, you feel the same way, and if you weren't, make sure that you go next year. And it really was a phenomenal event all the way around. Today I got Dr. Toby Brooks with us. Dr. Brooks is the associate professor at Texas Tech. He is the director of fitness of research and education for the IYCA, the International Youth Conditioning Association. He's worked for the Raiders, USA Baseball, and a handful of other organizations. But, I came across Dr. Brooks. They just put out a product called the Long-Term Athlete Development, the Lifelong Training Roadmap. And as you all know, I have 4 kids. Been working diligently to try to really research the best way to train them as they continue in their athletic careers. And I want to reach out to the experts. And so Dr. Brooks, Dave Gleason, Will Fleming, who was the first guest on Our Game Chalk Talk, all put together this product. And just a side note, they graciously have offered a 25% discount to anyone that's listening to this episode. We'll make sure to link that up. But if you go to iyca.org/LTAD, you can get that discount by going there. And so make sure you check that out. Today we talked quite a bit about his journey, the benefits of long-term athletic development, progressions that he uses, the science and the practical application, dealing with that population. So you're going to get a ton out of this episode, whether or not you work with that demographic, that population, or not. And so I want to take this time to recognize our sponsors. Again, Play, Ignition, Sorinex, and Elite Form for coming on for another year. And just can't say enough about all those companies. But the sponsor of this episode, Play, really stepped up again at this conference. Had fantastic conversations with them. Such a great group of people, and they continue to give back in a big, big way. Lots coming down the road for Play in 2016. We'll release that kind of as they go, but make sure that you're following them on social media, and so you can stay up with what they got going on. But exciting times at Play. And if you're in the market for sports flooring, make sure you reach out to them and just have a conversation. It's the best product out there by far, but you obviously have to do your due diligence and go through that process. But I can save you some time and just tell you that it's the best one out there. So check them out. Lastly, Ask Coach Mac is a podcast that I'm releasing at the end of this month to answer questions from you guys. I get tons and tons of questions, and this seems to be a great way for me to streamline that. I'll make sure to link all that up at the end of the month. But in the meantime, if you have a question that you feel would benefit the community, send a voicemail to me by going to my website, and clicking the little link on the side, send a voicemail, leave your name, your question, and if it's something that I think will benefit the community, I'll make sure to include it in the podcast. So more details to come about that towards the end of the month, but I want to get to this episode. I know you're going to enjoy it. Sit back, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, guys, welcome back to Iron Game Chalk Talk. Excited to have Dr. Toby Brooks with us. Toby is a associate professor down at Texas Tech, and so brought him on. As you guys know, I have a 15-year-old son that is a pretty decent wrestler, and so something that has been a focus to me is long-term athletic development, and Toby's one of the foremost experts in that area. So I wanted to bring him on, share him with everybody. Toby, I appreciate you coming on, brother.
Ron, thanks for having me. This is an honor and happy to do it.
Well, before we dive into long-term athletic development, I want to get in just to your background. Tell us your story. Kind of how'd you land at Texas Tech, and through sport and the whole deal.
Sure. Well, I was a basketball player growing up. I always wanted to play football, but I grew up in the sticks in Southern Illinois. In high school, I graduated with 40 other students, so we didn't have a football team.
They would have kicked you out of Texas if you didn't play.
They would have. You probably need to edit that out, or they'll kick me out of Texas if they find out the truth. Now, I was a basketball player. I made a brief attempt at playing college ball and realized that my glory days were behind me, and that's when I started looking at careers that would allow me to stay involved with athletics, even though my skill set wouldn't take me there. And that's how I got interested in athletic training. I tore my ACL in high school and got exposed to the field, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. You can work with athletes the rest of your life, whether or not you can play. So I ended up at Southern Illinois University Carbondale, where I did my undergrad, and then basically applied to every D1 major conference school that I could find out of undergrad to get a graduate assistantship, because SIU prepared me academically, but I really wanted that big-time college athletics experience for grad school. So I ended up at the University of Arizona. I worked 2 years with women's gymnastics. There were 3 positions, one with football, one with volleyball, one with gymnastics. Gymnastics was the one I wanted the least, and that's the one I got, but man, it was a blessing. I learned more about injury and the psychology of sport, and that's when it really laid the groundwork for me about how important long-term athletic development is, because these girls are doing gymnastics, 8-10 hours a day from the age of 4 on.
Doing it, that's for sure.
So gymnastics for 2 years, and then I got my master's and started working on my PhD and switched over to football. So I worked football at U of A for a season, and then ended up at the University of Texas, El Paso. I bounced around after that, Arena League, did some NFL internships, minor league baseball. Really, my wife and I were married my senior year of college. I think we had 14 addresses in our first 12 years of marriage, kind of that typical coaching life, just bouncing around, trying to hitch a wagon to an up-and-coming coach, hoping that I'd end up at a 1A school or an NFL team. And about that time, my daughter was born, and that's when everything really changed for me in terms of priorities. That's when education became, the teaching part of what I do has always been something I'm interested in. But, man, I always loved traveling, and I loved being on the road and being part of the team. And we were on the road. I was at Liberty University, and we were on the road when my daughter took her first steps, and that really changed me.
Sure.
It made it tough, and that's when I started looking at teaching all the time. So I went back, actually, to my undergrad, SIU Carbondale, and was program director there for 3 years. And then this opportunity at Tech came open. It'll be 6 years next week, and I've been here ever since. We have the largest entry-level master's program in the country, 100% first-time pass rate for the past 5 years. I mean, it's a blessing to be here. Our students I'd put up against any in the country. It's awesome because a lot of collaboration here. A lot of places I've been, there are turf wars between the strength staff and the athletic training staff, and if there's OT or PT. But man, lots of collaboration here. Athletics is an integral part of what we do. We've got students with every intercollegiate sport, clinics all over town. People just get along well, and they respect and recognize, how we complement one another. We're not competing; we're complementing each other.
Absolutely. Well, I know I've ran into that myself. Like I said, I have a son that's a decent wrestler, and here I am, a pretty good strength coach, pretty recognized strength coach, all those things, and I'm sitting here going, really when it comes to training my own son, I'm lost a little bit. It's hard to it's kind of hard to dumb it down a little bit enough to get to that level. And the other part, it's like, I remember the first time handing him a jump rope and saying, here we go, let's get 100 ropes in. And he's like, okay, what do I do first? I'm going, yeah. What do you mean? What do you do first? And so it's been an area of interest in mine. What are, let's just go, what are the benefits? To having this plan and
Sure.
kind of at what ages do we start that process?
Yeah. Well, I feel your pain completely. Our experiences sometimes kind of handicap us or they narrow our focus so much. You're used to working with a D1 or professional athlete, and to peel that back from a motor learning standpoint to something appropriate for an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old or even a 15-year-old, it's more than just watering your D1 programming down.
Right.
He's not just a little D1 athlete. He's a 15-year-old kid who's developing, who is not yet, from a neurologic standpoint as much as physical standpoint, he is not yet the organism that what you're used to every day, what they are. So for me, the research is pretty clear that we basically have to treat kids like a completely different animal. They are, from a motor learning standpoint, completely different. And much of our programming is designed to help lay the groundwork so that a coach like you working with a D1 athlete, you're working with an athlete who wrestles or an athlete who plays football as opposed to a football player. We've probably seen these, the scoreboard, the combine guys that they score well, but they don't necessarily play well.
Right.
And lots of times, this whole mentality of teaching to the test has really shortcutted the whole process.
Absolutely right.
I teach a kid how to be a good athlete in terms of a 40-yard dash, but does that equate to on-field performance? And that's where long-term athletic development really has the benefit. And that's honestly the hardest sell for parents is the payoff is months and in most cases years down the road. So especially for folks that are owning and operating these training facilities, it's a hard sell to say, hey, send your kid to my place 2 or 3 times a week for $15 a session, and I promise you in 6 years he'll be a better athlete. Well, they don't want that. They want a 6-week boot camp so that my vertical leap goes up 3 inches. And you really shortcut the process.
Right.
And it's short-sighted, but we're a microwave society. Nobody likes crock pots anymore. They like quick fixes and immediate gratification, and that's not what long-term athletic development's all about.
Right. Well, I know I found that myself is with my with my own son, and I like to think that I'm a pretty good coach, and I worry about the health of my athletes and all that. But at the same time, with my own son, if he's got bad technique on a hang clean or something along those lines, then we're going to stop. We're going to slow it down. We're going to make sure he goes through all the progressions and all that. When I'm getting other people's sons as a freshman in college, they may be stepping on the field 3 months later, 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, and it's like, do you really, do I have the time to slow this down and to teach it like that? And so, when you're dealing with those parents, especially, we got a lot of performance coaches that have performance facilities that listen to the show. What are the, how do you sell a parent? How do you sell the athletes on, yeah, you see you see all the combine training going on, all the cool stuff. We need to stop and really just learn how to decelerate. We need to learn, need to learn the proper progression for a pull or a hinge in the hips. How do you sell them on that when they're in such a microwave society?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways. The first thing that's important to remember is we see this whether it's piano or whether martial arts is probably marketed better than anybody. They set up a system and you earn belts and you earn your way through the progression. Nobody goes into a dojo and expects to become a black belt in 6 weeks. They recognize from the start, and it's marketed as such, that you have to earn your way through this progression. So one of the things I think is critical for coaches that are marketing and selling is to convince the parents of the reality that exposing your kid to a broad variety of movement experiences as early as possible in life is much akin to learning language. Okay, so I only speak one language. I'm in West Texas. Lots of my students are bilingual. And I always ask them, how did you learn that? Well, they just spoke both languages in our house. Okay, so you just picked it up passively, right? Yeah. So we've got other kids who were one language who took, they've had 4 Spanish classes in college, and they can't speak a word of conversational Spanish. Well, what's the difference there? Well, that long-term exposure is the difference. And if you look at language acquisition and motor skill acquisition in the brain, they actually occur pretty close together.
Right.
If we look at these sensitive periods of motor learning, they're much like language acquisition. So if I'm trying to sell this to mom or dad, I say, look, you bring your kid to me, I will expose them to as many different motor skills. I'll teach them how to decelerate. I'll teach them how to accelerate. I'll teach them how to land without a valgus collapse. I mean, you don't have to use that terminology, but basically I'm going to teach them all the things they need to know, and they're going to get experience in trying out and refining all the things they need to do to be the best athlete they can be. And doing that in small amounts over time is far better, and the end result is going to be light years beyond if they go to college and work with you. So you've seen it before, a kid that's either never hang cleaned before or he's had terrible or non-existent coaching. It's really hard. It's almost like trying to teach someone with an accent to speak without it. I mean,
Right.
That's ingrained. That motor pattern is there for better or for worse.
Agreed.
If I can get them early, if I can teach my 12-year-old daughter how to hang clean with a broomstick now, she can pick that up and she can refine that skill over years, as opposed to bad technique her freshman year of college. Now you've got to deconstruct the whole thing and start from scratch. It's way better to just build to begin with, correct, than it is to have to tear away old crap and start fresh.
No, I couldn't agree more. That's I learned about you through the product that you guys put out with Dave Gleason and Will Fleming, the long-term athletic development. It's I think the lifelong training roadmap or something along those lines.
Yep.
And there's a great progression in there. Take us kind of through kind of a typical progression and maybe 3 to 5 priorities.
Well, with the IGCT, our model basically divides learning or acquiring athleticism over the lifespan into 3 broad categories, and you could even add a 4th if you're really looking at the youngest. We call that one movement foundation. But basically 6 to 9, 9 to 13, and 14 plus are kind of the major categories that we look at. And you start and you look at it as a continuum. The 6 to 9 group is going to be almost exclusively outcome-based coaching. In other words, I give the kids a task. I don't care how they do it. They have to experiment with how to do it. So I might say, okay, we've got a basketball on one end line of a court. I want you to get that ball from one end to the other 6 times without doing it the same way any 2 times. Okay, you can push it with your nose and bear crawl. Basically just leave it up to them. That's in stark contrast to what we see in a lot of the sport specific. You go to a baseball training facility and they got 6-year-olds learning to swing like Albert Pujols. Okay, that's form-based coaching.
Right.
6-year-olds aren't ready for that. They don't need that. They need to experience the failure in order to figure out what proper form needs to feel like and what it needs to look like. I had an old pastor who used to say, people in the U.S. Treasury, they never look at counterfeit bills. They only look at authentic bills. And when the counterfeit, when it comes across, they're so familiar with it that they recognize it immediately. Okay, so in terms of athleticism, we need to give them opportunities to see what's wrong enough so that they can understand what's right. Okay,
Absolutely.
So at one end of the continuum is almost exclusively outcomes-based coaching with very little, if any, form-based coaching. And I've coached little kids before, and I'm used to working with older kids, and I default into that form-based coaching.
Right.
I'm trying to teach a 6-year-old, how
Keep
to
their
land
elbows in.
30 degrees of deflection and avoid valve, and you take a step back and you're like, they don't have any idea what I'm talking about. B, it doesn't work. Okay, so for me the real challenge is that 10 to 13 group, because they're kind of in between. They need a little bit more of that form-based instruction. In terms of architecture. They're starting to grow a little bit. They're starting to get a little strength, especially a 13-year-old girl. She's she's in the throes of puberty, and she's starting to get some height, and she's starting to get some strength. And so she needs some more of that form-based instruction. So I can't just expect my 12-year-old to know how to jump serve just through experimentation. She needs some pointers on the finer skills of that sport.
Right.
And then the 14 plus, it is form-based, but there's still a fair amount of outcome-based instruction that needs to go there. So allowing some time for some free play or some competition or some other things that might give them an opportunity, not just to reinforce the skills they already have, but to refine them. Okay. At that point, most of their motor patterns are, for better or for worse, are probably at least started to be entrenched. So we need some more opportunities for them to tweak those patterns and become more efficient, whether it's running gait or how they jump or how they decelerate. And the only way we do that is through repetition. And so as an athletic trainer, I struggle with that because, repetition leads to overuse injury leads to sometimes macroscopic trauma.
Right.
So it's not necessarily, you hear this 10,000 hour rule all the time. That's not what I'm advocating. I don't care. I don't want them doing the same skill for 10,000 hours. To me, the real key is variety.
Right.
Okay? And a dear friend of mine, John O'Sullivan, with Changing the Game Project, he says, my 8-year-old, he loves macaroni and cheese, but I don't give him that for every meal. As his parent, I know what's better for him, and it's diversity. Well,
Right.
Movement's the exact same way. My kid might love basketball, but if that's all we ever do, that's like feeding him macaroni and cheese for every meal. We need some diversity there. And unfortunately, the day of the 3 and the 4 sport athlete is almost gone. But there's plenty of evidence that would suggest that that's what's going to result in the best finished product, wherever you put that finish line, whether it's senior year of high school, senior year of college, or wherever. You know better than I do. Your coaching staff, they're competent professionals. And you as a strength coach, you are a competent professional. You're not looking at recruiting film of a kid to see who's the best power cleaner on the high school team. You can teach that. You're looking
Right.
for athleticism.
Right.
That's what parents miss, is that coaches aren't necessarily looking for the best football player. I remember several years ago, Oregon State signed 8 shortstops to their baseball team. And people were like, well, the shortstop's the best athlete on the team in most
Right.
high schools, right?
Right.
I can take 8 shortstops and make a left fielder and a third baseman and a first, and I'm going to have the most athletic team on the field. If a coaching staff is only looking for the best center fielder, and that's a kid who's played center field since he was 4 years old, they're going to miss out on some better athletes.
Right.
So,
No, I couldn't agree more with that for sure. The thing that you touched on, and that it's not just early specialization in sport now, but it's almost a lack of physical education, period.
absolutely.
You've been around. I mean, I know, Dave Gleason. We've had Will Fleming on the show before. Here's some performance coaches that are really, they're really getting into the youth market space. What have you seen done? What models have you seen that have been proven in terms of some of these performance coaches that want to add this long-term athletic development approach to their current product line, I guess?
Well, I owned and operated a training facility of my own back in Illinois when I was at SIU, and it's almost counterintuitive to your business, especially back then. This was 6 years ago, and everybody was, at least in the adult circles, was all about the boot camp model. And
Right.
bring kids in 6 weeks, and I kid to my students. I say, you bring me your 12-year-old, and I guarantee I'll give you 200% money back that in a year their vertical leap will be better. Well, yeah, from the age of 13 to 14, they're going to get stronger and they're going to jump higher, right? But it seemed counterintuitive. But what I discovered was this long-term model creates raving fans out of parents. Once they buy in, they're in until their kid's done with sport. And you've got, it's much easier to keep a customer that you have than to constantly be beating the bushes for another 6-week boot camp kid.
Right.
So there are many models out there, and what we see at a lot of these sports-specific facilities. So in my same town, in the same industrial complex, there was a baseball-only facility. And this place, they had a travel organization. So they had 8, U10, U12. They had probably 12 teams that they would travel with during the season. if you wanted to play on those teams, you had to train at their facility, and hitting instruction was about all they did. They didn't do much defense. They didn't have room for it. But it was basically baseball 365, that's all they did. And kids that kind of balked at that, or parents that balked at that, started kind of gravitating to our place, realizing that I don't necessarily need to swing a bat 365 days a year to become a better hitter. There are other things I can work on, core strength and eccentric strength. There are a lot of things that are going to cross-pollinate my ability to hit a baseball that don't involve me hitting a baseball all the time. So those are really kind of the two models, is early specialization, which is kind of for better or for worse, especially in the travel leagues and in the club scene, that it's almost like you get sucked in. My daughter's playing club volleyball for the first time starting next month, and these parents, they'll travel all over the country, and they've got their 12-year-olds playing volleyball year-round.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it's real tempting to fall into. You're like, well, if she doesn't play on this club team, then she's not going to make the junior high team next year. If she doesn't make the junior high team, then she's not going to make the high school team. So it's almost like we fool ourselves as parents into thinking, if I don't make the right decision for my 8-year-old, then I've screwed them over for their athletic career for the rest of their life.
I agree. Go ahead.
Well, what we're not recognizing there is high school coaches aren't stupid. Okay, if you take an elite athlete and you see them at your tryout, are you dumb enough to overlook them and sign the kid that's played year-round volleyball for 7 years?
Right.
You're not.
Right.
We all believe in ourselves as coaches enough to think, I can take an elite athlete talent and make them a good volleyball player. Okay, and unfortunately, we don't give coaches. I think the parents don't give coaches enough credit in thinking that, they can take my good athlete and turn her into a good volleyball player.
Right. Well, that's what we're facing that right now with my 8th grader. My daughter, she's, we're trying to figure out, okay, how. That's the question you have to ask yourself: is what sport do we have to have her in so that she has a chance in high school? Which is totally the wrong way of going about it, for sure. You mentioned the 3 age groups. The 6 to 9, the 10 to 13, the 14 plus. I mean, kind of walk me through a normal training week. What does a normal training week look for that 6 to 9-year-old? Okay. And then for each 3 groups.
I think we talk about it in terms of training, especially for the 6 to 9 group. It makes us feel better as coaches if we talk about periodization and we talk about schemes. I think Dave Gleason says it best. He's like, basically, you're paying me to play with your kid for 50 minutes 3 times a week. And play it's not work, okay? And we love to embrace the Ray Lewis quotes about embracing the grind and working hard, but to me, that's not the time for it. I want the kid to learn to love to come compete. Dave Jack is an awesome coach, a powerful motivator, and he always says, get in their space. So that they're in your facility, but get in their space, let them know it's safe, and let's just this is what we're going to do for this 50 minutes is we're going to play.
Right.
And whether mom and dad are arguing at home or, school's tough or they're bullies, here you're immune from all that. So let's just set that aside. So it's going to be lots of semi-structured free play or, play with purpose. It's not just chaos. I don't want to make it sound like that. It's not just romper room and drop your kids off for 50 minutes of daycare. There's purpose behind it. So what I like to do is pick a particular focus for a week. So if we want to work on deceleration skills, then we'll work on some drills or some games that involve a lot of deceleration. Okay? There also needs to be a fair amount of competition worked in so that their effort is better whether they realize it or not. So Dave is one who he likes to use a lot of obstacle courses, and whether it's for time or paired and partnered off where we're racing against another team, whatever. What I especially for smaller facilities, you might not necessarily have enough kids to group them by boys and girls, but that can create some challenges. I had a girl who was a 12-year-old swimmer and a couple of elementary school basketball player boys, and she was, she's already stronger than them. She could jump higher than them. She could throw further than them, and that was hard on their self-esteem. So you got to be creative in how you group things and preserve their their sense of pride and their self-perception. But lots of what we're doing here is just playing with purpose. I think that's kind of the mantra to take home here. Something I've embraced with my own kids, we call it Fun 20. And I've got 2 kids, so 6 days a week, I will spend 20 minutes a day. So each kid gets, so we alternate. So my son might get Monday, Wednesday, Friday. My daughter might get Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. But it's 20 minutes. And we've got what we call movement menu. It's something I stole from Will Fleming. So my son's movement menu is different from my daughter's movement menu because she likes volleyball and softball. So we come up with skills that correlate to those sports better. He's more baseball, basketball, so we've got some skills that correlate to that. So it could be throwing for accuracy. It could be throwing for distance. It could be running and decelerating, freeze tag, that kind of thing. But anyway, it's 20 minutes with dad, no electronics. Brother or sister isn't involved. Mom isn't involved. It's face-to-face, just 20 minutes of us.
Right.
It's like an hour a week, okay? Not necessarily a huge thing, but what I found is the psychological aspect of it is as important as the physical aspect. Just
No doubt.
Distractions aside, you've got my undivided attention for 20 minutes. And lots of times it spills over. We call it Fun 20 because it makes it less of a, I don't have an hour to spend. If I might end up spending an hour, even though I initially started with 20 minutes, we have so much fun that we end up doing other things. But,
Sure.
So I can send them training and pay somebody else to do it. Lots of times I have to because you know as well as I do, Dad doesn't know anything. It doesn't matter what your diplomas or your resume says. They'll listen to some coach with lesser skills than you because they're not your dad and you are. So, but that 20 minutes is basically just playing with purpose. Okay?
Right.
And I'm in the midst of it because my son's 9, so he's at the
that age.
tail end of that small group, and my daughter's 12, so she's starting to enter into that 14 plus. So I'm learning that some of the things I used to really hammer on parents about, it's easier said than done.
No doubt. Tough preaching or easy preaching, tough living, right?
Absolutely.
What about that 10 to 13-year-old?
That to me is the most challenging, and that's what I'm struggling with my daughter. There's so much variability here. My daughter grew 4 inches last year.
Wow.
So if you think about motor patterning, basically every lever arm in her body is different than it was 6 months ago, but the same brain's controlling it. So she is constantly in the midst of reprogramming herself how to move. And we see this especially with males when they enter that big growth spurt in junior high or early high school. And, they're clumsy. We say that all the time. Well, yeah, because their brain is still trying to control a body that's 4 inches shorter than it actually is 6 months later. So we have to give them some opportunities for some outcome-based instruction.
Right.
But they are starting to enter more competitive sporting activities. And if they're not competitive, they get left behind. And we don't want that for our kids. So they have to get some more form-based instruction. My daughter had never played volleyball, and she didn't know how to serve. And she was one of the only girls. They had like 90 girls that tried out for 20 spots. And so she made the team, the B team, but she didn't know how to serve. And she's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make the team if I can't serve. So I can't just expect her to discover that through outcome-based instruction.
Right.
She needs some finer tips, okay? So I've pendulum swung away from the form-based instruction and then so much to the outcome-based that you realize, well, they still need to know how to hit a baseball. They still need to know how to throw a football or to block. I mean, they need some of that finer aspect of coaching, but they're still not little adults. Okay?
Right.
I can't just take Michael Jordan's jump program from 20 years ago and pull out the last set and call it youth appropriate. Okay?
Right.
It needs to be different. So for me, the challenge with this group is how much of it needs to be centered on how to do skills versus how much of it still needs to be rooted in some experience. Once you hit the 14 plus, you're kind of in the clear because by that point, they're probably, if they're not done growing, I'm talking mostly about the girls, they're becoming more of what they're going to be when they're an adult at that
Right.
point. So we can cater more toward that traditional, what we would think of as sport-specific instruction, it's a little safer placed with that 14-plus group because by then they've probably gravitated to probably one or two sports. But, the other thing to consider here, you hit on it, PE isn't what it used to be.
That's absolutely right.
Is my daughter going to be able to play volleyball when she's 30 years old? I doubt it. How many opportunities are there for 30-year-old women to play volleyball? Can she play tennis? Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So can I teach her some skills that will allow her to carry over and be physically active for the rest of her life? And to me, that's the most important part. We get so sucked into the short term here and now that we lose sight of the fact that we're talking about the health of our country here. Okay. If all my kid's ever done is one sport and there are no opportunities for them to play that sport after high school or even college, how healthy are they going to be?
Right.
Okay? And we see that all the time. You get a kid who graduates after 4 years of college, they're used to eating 4,000 calories a day, and now all of a sudden they don't have 2 hours of practice, and what happens? Well, their weight blows up, and their knees hurt, and their back hurts, and now all of a sudden they're a drain on our healthcare system.
Right.
So I hate to get too grandiose about this, but we're really talking about the welfare of our nation. If I can teach a kid at 8 to love to move, he or she is going to be healthy for the rest of their life, or healthier than they would be if they just focus on, I'm a football player until high school graduation. And from then on, all I do is gain weight and talk about how I used to play football. That's asinine to me.
It's absolutely right. Well, I would assume then again with the 14 plus, and this is what I've found is that it's a combination of both. You got to have the outcome based, you got to have the form based, but there's a place in there. I mean, I throw outcome based task in our conditioning and in our training all the time. And what I found is it's the most fun. It's what they have.
Oh, they love it.
They love that competitive drive. They love exploring, even still as an 18 and 22-year-old, what their body is capable of doing. And that confidence that breeds from that is every bit as important, like you mentioned, for the rest of their life as it is the sport application of it.
When I was at Arizona, I had the pleasure of working with a coach by the name of Brad Arnett. He owns a facility up in Wisconsin. I trained J.J. Watt. But he came in my first year with football, and we did the off-season strongman when that was still novel. A lot of places do it, but golly, you're flipping tires. Is there a right or wrong way to flip a tire? I don't know if a textbook teaches form on tire flipping. I don't know if a textbook teaches form on farmer walks, I can go to a textbook and learn how to power clean or hand clean, but a farmer's walk, you experiment, you figure out how I'm going to carry this crap, right?
Right.
You're absolutely right. There's nothing more motivating for the athletes than doing stuff they've never, they've done related skills, but they've never had to do that before. So the strongman stuff in athletics is awesome because it cross-pollinates all their strength and conditioning, but there isn't a right, there are better ways and worse ways, but there's not a textbook right way to flip a tire.
Right.
That's outcome-based coaching at its most fundamental level.
The most fun is watching your volleyball players or your women's golfers flipping a tire from occasionally. They just, it changes their whole world,
Yep.
But yeah, no, that's cool, man. Well, like I said, I came across you with this product that you guys put out. I knew Will and Dave pretty well. Tell us about the long-term athletic development, the lifelong training roadmap. It's you guys did a great job with that.
Well, thank you. It was actually a project we've been working on indirectly for probably about 6 years, and bits and pieces of it have been floating around in the three of our collective consciousness for at least that long. And we finally said, this is what's needed, because everybody, parents at least, are gravitating toward that sport-specific model. Let's put it together, okay? So my role was to really kind of try to pull together the science and look at, historic models of long-term athletic development around the globe, where it got its start, what kind of research. I always say this in my strength conditioning class, communist society is terrible for human condition, but man, it was pretty good for research because you could do things back then that you could never get away with now. So, a lot of the studies are old, and there are holes in some of them, but
sure,
they're still plenty to be gleaned from the Soviet model, or even the way the Canadians have handled hockey in the recent past. And these nationalized systems of long-term athletic development really can inform us a lot. So we don't have a nationalized system for wrestling for junior high boys, but you can certainly root how you train your son in the way the Chinese train their divers, and recognize that it's not on their diving. They're gymnasts a lot of times, and there's no better sport in a lot of ways in its purest form than gymnastics, because it teaches you proprioception and balance and strength. The way we do it as Americans is not necessarily what I'm saying, but
sure,
teaching kids how to use their body is what gymnastics was all about.
Right.
Okay? So anyway, we recognize, okay, so I'll kind of handle the history and the research, even from the overuse injuries and psychological burnout, that kind of thing. And then Will is more geared towards that 14 plus group. A lot of his lifters and his athletes tend to be high school and college, and Dave is more geared towards the younger end of the spectrum. So they really complement one another perfectly. Philosophically, they're right there together with one another, but Dave has worked more heavily with the 6 to 13s out of his facility, and Will has been more the high school and college. So they developed all the programming and videoed the sample sessions that you see. There's tons and tons of video examples of it's not just a cookbook full of drills. And that's what a lot of times you buy products and that's what you get. And there's value in that. I can glean a lot from looking at your programming. But the thing I like about this particular product is you actually get to see coaching in action. And for people that don't have access, if you're a member of a collegiate staff, you get to see your colleagues in action, and you'll feed off one another a lot. For a coach that's at a small high school all by themselves, or somebody opening a facility, you're kind of on your own. So seeing coaching practice in action has a lot of value.
That's no question. No question.
And those guys are great motivators. They really connect with athletes on a personal level. And I think you'll see some great examples of coaching practice that is it's current, it's pertinent, and athletes respond to it.
No, I couldn't agree more. And again, it's like, I'm home on Christmas break here and finding things to do with the kids, and being able to pull up something and find a quick game or something along those lines has been fantastic. So I appreciate you guys putting that out. We always end the show here with some resources. So give me the best piece of coaching advice you've ever received.
Probably one of the best coaches is Dave Jack. I mean, if you've had a chance to hear Dave speak,
he's been on the show. Yeah,
he's about 4 levels higher in a lot of ways than most of the coaches I've worked with. And the thing about Dave that I love and respect is there's no question he's knowledgeable in terms of coaching athletes. He knows progressions, and he can talk linear periodization versus he knows the stuff. But what sets him apart is he connects with an athlete on a level unlike a lot of coaches I've ever worked with. And his advice to get in their space and don't just hammer on a kid who's not giving you effort. Figure out why they're not giving you effort, okay? Figure out what buttons to push, and then push them. Okay? One of my favorite sayings is, sometimes a kid needs a hug around the neck, and sometimes they need a kick in the pants. The real hard part about coaching is knowing when to kick and when to hug.
Right.
And, I've come down like a ton of bricks on a kid before, only to find out, grandma died last night. You feel like an idiot. And other times, we get this all the time. A kid they'll be running gassers, and they'll call over the athletic training staff, and they need a stretch. Okay, well, they're using you to get out of the drill because they're being late. Okay, so I'm giving them a hug around the neck, and they need a kick in the pants. Okay?
Right.
So, unfortunately, in this society, and in this litigious age, as an athletic trainer, if somebody says they have chest pain or a concussion, by golly, I can't give them a kick in the pants, or I'm going to lose my life. There's lots of legal reasons why I maybe can't coach as hard as I might tend to want to.
Sure.
But understanding your athlete and knowing what makes them tick and knowing how to motivate them, those are the most important skills. And Dave's better at that than just about anybody I've been around.
No, I agree.
Brad Arnett is the same way. I mean, he's the one who taught me first and foremost that you got to know these kids in order to know when you're being played and when they need you to be hard on them. Because lots of times what we need isn't what we would choose.
No doubt. Absolutely. What about we'll make sure to link up you guys' product as well, but give us a book, app, and website recommendation.
I use the Coach's Eye app. Will expose me to that. I teach athletic trainers to hang clean, which may be that's heresy in some circles, but I teach strength and conditioning to athletic trainers. Not because I want them to be strength coaches, and certainly not because I want them to walk in the weight room and claim to be know-it-alls. I want them to know what restrictions need to be placed on an injured athlete. If I've got a knee injury, I want them to know what all the lifts involve and how that influences what that kid can and can't do. So the Coach's Eye app, we use that, just the telestrator function, so that they can, increasingly athletes are a visual generation. So I can tell them, but if I can show them, it really comes home. As far as a book, the most recent book I read, related to coaching at least, was it really changed me. It's called Mindset by Carol Dweck. She's if you've seen it, or it's becoming increasingly popular, but I've started to employ some of those open mindset concepts, not just with athletes but with students, and recognizing that my capacity isn't a preset. There's not necessarily a limit on it. I want kids to be willing to challenge themselves with new skills. So outcomes-based or form-based instruction is a great example for that 14+. You got to recognize that not only is it okay to fail, I want you to fail. Because in failing, you're learning how to succeed.
Absolutely.
And so that whole mindset approach from Dweck is critical in helping them keep it in perspective and be healthy and not expect perfection when they've never tried something for the first time.
Right.
So that was the book. That was app. What was the
website?
Website. I'm a big fan of Eric Cressy's stuff. I've worked with baseball for a fair amount of my career. He's good because not only is he knowledgeable, his list of strength conditioning crap to read is a quick way to filter through. If you're busy and you don't want to filter through what's good and what's bad, Eric does that for you. So that's a nice thing.
Well, buddy, I appreciate it, man. That's some great information. I took 2 pages of notes here. Where can everybody stay in touch with you?
You can email me anytime, toby.brooks@ttuhsc.edu. I'm working with the Changing the Game project. Hopefully we'll be doing some live events in the spring. Those are geared towards coaches and parents. I am working on my new blog site, hopefully, and have it up. It's called bornathletic.com. It's basically intended to be geared primarily toward parents trying to navigate this whole early specialization thing, with the idea that lots of times when we think people are born athletic, we assume that the natural assumption, kind of like that Dweck mindset thing we were talking about. The thing is, you realize that we were all born with the ability to maximize our potential.
Absolutely.
I might not necessarily be the fastest kid on the team, but I can be the fastest me I can be, and that's all I can control. And that's one of my favorite quotes is control the controllables. So,
that's awesome.
Put the effort in.
That's another one. Writing that one down. No, that's good, man. Well, hey, I know how much goes into doing all the things that you're doing to give back, man, and so I really appreciate it, and I know everybody else does as well. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. My pleasure.
That's it for this episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk. Thanks to this week's guest as well as our sponsors for bringing this episode to you for free. Make sure to check out ronmckeefery.com, where you can join our mailing list, find the show notes, including all the links and resources mentioned, and information about Coach McKeefery's other products. While you are there, please join Coach McKeefery in the comments section thanking our guest for sharing. If you haven't subscribed to Iron Game Chalk Talk on YouTube or iTunes yet, make sure to do so. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome. Coach McKeefery can be found on Twitter @rmckeefery, on Facebook and YouTube /Ron.McKeefery. That's it for this week. Be sure to check back next week for another great episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk.